it's Rachel Maldonado,
Hi, it's Tom Luongo.
and we are talking about the masculinity crisis. Tom, is there such a thing?
It's a good question, Rachel. I, in many ways, yes, and I think it's one of the bigger, it's one of the bigger issues of the day, right? We've got I think, an entire generational loss of what men think they're supposed to do. I think young men have been programmed to think that they're supposed to be something they're not supposed to be. And there's you have that side of it, and then you have the other side of it where they don't know what to do, and then the women turn around and they don't know what they want. I mean, the women know what they want, but they're not allowed to say it because there's this whole idea that traditional gender roles are somehow suspect. I think the biggest issue, and this is an issue that's run up, that's run in my relationship with my wife. We're married 31 years, which is, this idea that the man's job in the relationship is to make the woman feel emotionally safe, which is the hard part. And when you have men who are nothing more than overgrown boys, and I've been at that level in my life, then that is not going to that's not conducive to a healthy long-term relationship. And then of course it's not a healthy relationship for the foundation on which to build a family, and then blah 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 blah, and it all just kind of snowballs. And then so and I see this with so many of my friends, like even of ones of my age and younger. How many of them are childless? How many of them have not been able to, if they have been able to find a relationship with a woman, when you look at it from the outside, there's sincere levels of, I wouldn't say toxicity, but I'd certainly say like codependency. And you look at it and you go, really? This is what you chose for yourself? Like, and be it your male friends or even your female friends, like you chose that guy. Like, so I don't know. There's a lot going on here, and when you tie it into what I think is happening at a societal and political level, which is clearly that there's a push towards the destruction of all of the societal institutions that hold society together, because frankly, communists like to destroy things, but they have no idea how to build anything back better. But they know how to destroy social bonds. Like, they're good at that. They've got playbooks for this. Right. And they've successfully done it in places like the Soviet Union, China, Cambodia, the United States, most of Europe, blah, 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 blah. So, but they don't know what to do after that. And so we're reaching this moment where the men don't know what to do. The women don't consciously know what they want, and both are at each other's throats and both distrust each other. And we're winding up with, unstable families, unstable relationships, a whole lot of what Austrian economists would call high time preference behavior, a lot of coping mechanisms, right? Video games, pornography, blah, 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 on the male side. On the women's side, hectoring, I don't know what, careers, whatever, and trying to substitute for not being moms. And like, the simple fact of the matter is that I think, women want to be moms, men want to be protectors. And why is that under attack? And why can't we I don't know, process that? So that's what I think the fundamentals of this quote unquote masculinity crisis is. I think the women are now taking on the roles of men because the men have abdicated that role within the relationship, because they're not acting like the emotional protectors of their spouses or of their significant others, or whatever you want to call them. And then worse than that, we're encouraging gender fluidity.
So much to unpack, but I did catch that you've been married 31 years, so congratulations. Yeah. You should get an award these days for something like that.
My wife should get an award, to be honest.
Of course. And you notice the young guys and also men your own age. And do you notice any distinct differences in how they think, these generational gaps in regard to masculinity?
Well, there's two things. One, It's a weird group of people that I personally hang out with. But when I go back over the course of my life, right, and I look at the people that, because you attract certain types of people to your life because, well, either, it is what it is. And I remember chatting with a friend of mine who was also childless, but and of my age. And I remember chatting with him about this ages ago, saying, look, you and your wife are kind of the, you're the node of stability within this whole group of broken people. I'm like, really? Well, that's kind of scary since, we're both broken. Right. But, I look back over it and I say to myself, okay, again, how many of them are childless? How many of them chose and in some respects chose the wrong man, in other respects didn't even choose a man, right? And I don't see one. I see one other normal family in all of the friends that I made in college, which are my lifelong friends. And I go back to the friends I had in high school that I would actually consider discussing, catching up with, and I have caught up with them over the last 20 years. And they both have, reasonably stable relationships, and good families. But they made, one came from a very good home, the other one came from an alcoholic's home. But that later one made the conscious decision as a 17-year-old, when I knew him in high school, to clean everything up immediately. Interestingly enough, he got God and religion, and from there built his life. And, and then I when I caught up with him about 10 years ago, it was funny. We were chatting and we had lunch and sat around and chatted for 3 hours, and find out I was listening to him going. And the one thing I would never believe, is that he sounded so much like my dad when my dad was raising my siblings, because my siblings are all much older than I am. So my dad was, he was coaching the little league and coach girls basketball, did all this stuff, was mom was a Brownie troop leader. My dad was a Cub Scout leader. Did all that stuff. Right. And of all the people in my life, when I was in high school, that I would have never considered was that kind of guy, this guy wound up being like that so those guys, they did it, right? They made the transition. I'm sure it was not easy. I'm sure it was hard. I'm sure they've had their ups and downs, yada, 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 but they had enough strength of purpose to, know their role, because they had either an extremely bad role model in the case of one, or an extremely good role model in the case of the other. I happen to have a very good role model. Even though I was a mess, my dad was phenomenal, right? And not without fault, certainly. And he lasted just long enough to pass enough on to me. My dad died when I was 25. So, but he set a good example for his only son that has a family, because his other son is gay. So when I to get back to, come back around to it, my quote unquote millennial friends, the problem for me is that most of them are gay. So it's actually really very difficult for me to make a distinction on this. But the older ones, and then the ones that aren't, are childless. And I look back, I look at them, and I'm saying, and they just all feel like overgrown boys. You visit their homes, it's, they've substituted, being, they still, you feel like you're walking into a mature 19-year-old's house. And what I mean by that is like their collection of Star Wars novels, for example, are prominently displayed as if this is somehow art, right? As opposed to, something else. Now, I'm not saying that I don't have the same problem in my living room, but my book collection is a lot more eclectic than that. And the Star Wars novels from my youth are way up on the top shelf, and all of the, and all of the poetry, the philosophy, all the Philip K. Dick, and all of that stuff is prominently displayed, along with the big stack of unread books that are literally sitting next to the television set that might be 4 feet tall, right? And then underneath all that is my board games. It's certainly a study in, my own set of coping mechanisms, right? But I wonder about this stuff, because there is so much of this that is just kind of a version of self-medication for people who are fundamentally unhappy, don't know why they're fundamentally unhappy, because they've been sold the wrong thing. And then you start looking at, these people, and you say to yourself, okay, well, they're 41 now. I could become dads for the first time at 41. And we also have, we also know it's well documented that we've had a massive drop off in testosterone, right, over the last 2 generations. And, you can argue whether or not that was designed or just, an outgrowth of, outgrowth of the world we developed, right? The move away from animal protein, and all the rest of it, which frankly was as much to me a political operation as it was anything else. But again, and so when you have this happening, and you have a group of, an entire 2 generations of boys who aren't given good role models as to, what's going to be, what their job is supposed to be, right? And they're being inundated on a regular basis from the stories that they're being presented, that it's okay for the woman to act like a man, right? Like, think about the effect of third wave feminism on female archetypes in movies. They're all basically dudes with boobs, right? And it goes all the way back, even, and it goes back to the early James Cameron movies like Aliens and Terminator 2 and whatnot. And to say that those women under those circumstances didn't need to become that, but that was under extreme duress, where there is no male, there is no male figure for them. They have to go into extreme mom protection mode, but that's not normal, right? And then we get into like these incredibly weak power fantasies like Captain Marvel and Black Widow and others. And you just say to yourself, what are we promoting here? And, the boys are sitting there going, huh? And that's what I'm supposed to be attracted to, right? And, the feminine women are all, kvetchy and bitchy, and, and we see, and the opposite side of it is Sex in the City, 3 sluts in New York. Really? So the women are getting the wrong programming. The men are getting the wrong programming. And now we're at the point now where they're trying to erase both. They tried to erase men's spaces. Now they're trying to erase women by making them all trans and giving men free access to being pervs. Like, does anybody not notice that this is sick? And so the problem is, like everything else, there's a cycle to everything, right? We're reaching the peak of, I think, of this cycle of where traditional gender roles have been destroyed in the popular zeitgeist. And the reaction is coming, but it's going to take, 2 generations for it to unwind itself. We have historical precedents for this. Nazi Germany and pre-Nazi Germany in the 1920s, 1930s, pre the Soviet Union or Bolshevik Revolution in turn of the century Tsarist Russia. Same thing's happening here, right? So, whether that was somebody putting the thumb on the scale to make that happen, or whether it's just a natural outgrowth of the anxiety of the loss of institutional confidence, is, anybody's guess. I'll leave that for y'all to decide. I don't have a firm answer for that. I can argue with both ways and probably be equally convincing even to myself. So
this cultural drive towards changing the narrative, and you say it's a couple decades in the making. Do you think it's by design?
Yes and no. What I think is that it's like everything else. The people who think they run the world have a plan. They publish these plans in unreadable white papers put out in institutions that nobody on a regular basis even knows exists, right? But they talk and they have these conferences amongst themselves where they chat about this stuff, and, be it at Davos or the Bilderberg Group or, CFR. I mean, there's all of these. There's for everyone of, there's at least 3 or 4 that you don't know of, right? And it doesn't matter. Like, you can go down that route if you want. It doesn't. What matters is that they really do think they run the world. They really do think that they have the power to influence and decide elections and the flow of government and the flow of and all of this stuff. And they have big books of compromat on CEOs, politicians, and all the rest of it. So we have knowing that we exist in that framework. Okay, that's fine, but they don't have complete control over everything. They have complete control over, they have somewhat control over the world we think that we want to interact with, right? And so in an internet culture, we interact with it directly, and we interact with it probably more than we should. And then what about those that don't interact with it? Are they influenced by all? Well, they're influenced only by second order effects, meaning they run into people who are, damaged by this stuff. So, but the people who are doing this, who think they're, and think they're like putting their thumb on the scale of the world and pushing it in the direction that they want it to go, are clearly think that they have more power than they do and are trying to push things in a particular direction. So yes, but at the same time, the systems that they've created in order to maximize these effects, and I'm talking now specifically things about monetary and political policy and foreign policy, engender the kind of anxiety and discontent at a, again, go back to the concept of emotional safety, right? That everybody's feeling. My partner Dexter White in Gold Goats and Guns has a great phrase for this. He calls them anxiety pimps, right? that they literally just create anxiety as a means by which to push the ball forward. So some of it is that, and some of it is just the natural reaction to the general anxiety and the general unsustainability of their systems. Because in order for them to do this, they have to then create an unsustainable monetary and political system, which engenders inflation and all of it. So, and wealth transfer from the lower classes to the middle to the upper classes and blah, 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 blah. Well, what do you think? Some of that is just the process. Some of that is the natural cycle of what all Republican forms of government go through. Human behavior is cyclic. So it's a back and forth between the effects and being opportunistic on taking advantage of the effects. And then we go through this, we go through these mini cycles, 10 to 14, 20 year waves. And you see this in things like film, stories, fashion, right? That's where these things really show themselves up. Art, right? And but eventually the whole thing has to reach a crescendo because you run out of room to blow up a bubble, an asset valuation bubble, and then the whole thing starts to collapse. We're at the moment where everything's starting to collapse. Because once there's a maximal distrust of the institutions that are supposed to keep society grounded, that's when everything breaks apart. And that chaos can't be controlled. And that's where they're running in the quote unquote, those that run the world. I like to call them Davos, but those that think they run the world, that's what they're going to run into. They're already running into it now, which is that, oh, you've gotten everything you wanted and you're still not very happy because now you've got to clamp down completely in a kind of authoritarian nightmare in order to maintain control that you've worked so hard to get. But what are you going to wind up with? You're going to wind up with a destructive, a capital destructive degradation of living standards and guess what happens at that point? You breed the hard people who turn around and go, you know what? No. And we're going to go back to traditional gender roles. We're going to go back to traditional ways. We're going to double down on that to a point where it's going to be insane. And because they can see what you did. And you're seeing this in Russia when they went through the unbelievable breakdown in the 1990s. And now they're building churches. They're building more churches than they are bombs in Russia. I got news for you. Up until about 2 years ago, they were building more churches in Russia than they were building bombs. Whether that's being cynically manipulated by Putin is your personal preference. I happen to see it as a massive organic wave, right? The return to those basic traditions, and that's what our stories are supposed to tell us about. right? That's what they're supposed to be, guidelines. Our artists are supposed to tell us this is how we get out of it. And each generation, each cycle are supposed to write the stories that they're 10, 20 years at looking ahead going, this is where you're headed. You better think about it. And those are the stories I ingested as a child, like to an insane degree. But, I also grew up in this weird world with, a crazy overbearing mom that left me with no ability to, as a young man, no ability to express my masculinity in a proper way. I had a very weird scenario. I had a good father, and I had a kind of crappy mom from this perspective. And so, all of this was at odds with each other. And, you're just left with, low self-esteem and weird, ideas about how you're supposed to, like you want to treat women well, but, you're not giving them what they want, which is that you're going to go out there and lead and, take care of them. And it was only very recently that my wife and I even were able to go, oh, that's what the problem is. I'm like, oh. And then once she decided to say, when and I'll be honest with you, it's only with Gold Goats and Guns that, and my years with Newsmax, and so this last 10 years, honestly, that, we've had a proper working relationship. She's the mom taking care of mostly raising the daughter, taking care of a lot of the things around the house, and supporting me while I go out and take on all the slings and arrows of the world and do the thing. And when we had that the basic setup in my house growing up, it wasn't without its trauma, because it was the Depression of the 1970s. And two people who didn't have the mechanisms, didn't have the understanding of what was happening to them. And so that had downstream effects across all four of their kids, their relationship, the relationship with their grandparents, and everything else. And so while they were trying to do it right, they ultimately, in many ways, failed. Not that they didn't put out a good faith effort, right? My wife and I have whenever we discuss this with her parents and her mom, who's 10 times worse than my mom ever was, says, oh, you just think I'm a terrible mom. And she's like, no, Camille, my wife, is very clear. She says, no, we're just trying to make different mistakes than you did. Right. Right. We're trying to we're going to wind up making the different mistakes. As parents, you're always going to make mistakes. So I think that this all ties in very deeply to what people have to do. So you've got to identify what your role in the relationship is, if you're going to have a healthy relationship with a woman. And, as a man, and not supportive, but emotionally, that creates emotional stability and emotional safety that makes the woman feel like, okay, I don't have to worry about X. Like, he's going to take care of that. I've got the kids to take care of, and that will allow her then to, do what she needs to do and to tend to the needs of the children, which for humans is off the charts. As a species, our kids are incredibly high demand. I mean, go look, right? Most species, their kids are out the door at 8 weeks. We're rearing our kids for 18 years. It's 25% of your life for one child. And if you have multiple children, it's going to be half your life. Right? So yes. It's a completely different mindset that humans have versus most other species. So
something very fascinating. This degeneracy cannot last.
No.
And we are at the tipping point. And what do you think is going to be the catalyst to push it over the line?
The final realization of the center of the country, or any of these populations, be it Germany or the United States or the Brits or everybody who's being pushed into this, that the center doesn't hold, to quote William Butler Yeats, and that the institutions aren't there and they don't work for you, and that you don't have elections, and that you don't have any power. You don't have any real say in the matter. That even if you're given a choice of who to vote for president, and there's no vote fraud, there's no corruption, Well, both candidates work for the same group, so you're choosing between, I guess you're choosing between their good looks, what team they play for, like, but they're all on the same team, and that's the illusion, right? So I think once we hit that, and I think we're very close to that. I mean, the trust in the media is at an all-time low. The trust in Congress is an all-time low. We have, from an institutional perspective, we have vandals going out of their way to destroy our faith in district attorneys, right? Attorneys general, judges, right? All of that stuff. So, what do you, when you're looking at it this way, and again, like I said, putting your thumb on the scale and then saying, oh, look, here's the reality you live in, but you put your thumb on the scale to create that reality. And then you're telling me that this is the only possible outcome. Like, well, this is where at some point, everybody's going to look at that and go, you know what? No, we can see you, and you're just putting your thumb on the scale. And when enough people really get truly angry about this, that's when we should be scared. And we have historical precedents for these. And we should be mindful of where it leads. Because the catalyst for the end of the change, for the end of this cycle, whatever it winds up being, the longer we wait for it to happen, the worse the reaction is going to be in terms of the violence that's going to explode. If you have a masculinity crisis, and why do you think they're trying to make the men low testosterone, take away their relationship with their children, set up the rules of divorce and everything else to be anti-male? Like there's a lot of that's out there. Not all of it is. It's not as, again, it's being done on purpose to make men give up. Because then the women who now no longer feel emotionally safe can't turn to their man, they turn to the state, and that's where we are. And that's what they're hoping, and they're hoping that they're going to be able to perpetuate that. Well, now that's going to reach its peak, and then, because the state's not providing. State can't even provide, stable pension systems, or just how about the state actually providing you with the basic services that they promised? Forget pensions. Like, yes, you're going to take care of you in your old age, or health insurance. These people can't even build roads anymore. And now they want to defund the police. So the police, the court system, politicians, these were all those institutions that were supposed to be there as substitutes for a stable partner, for women to feel like they have a safety to raise children in an environment where they can safely raise children. And guess what? All that's been taken away. So where are they going to turn to next? They're going to turn back to the hard men who are going, you know what? We told you so. And those guys that get it, put on their big boy pants and get out there and lead, are going to be the ones that start the process. Change the system, right? The question is, are there going to be enough of them? Well, I don't know. And how long is that going to take? Oh, probably 30 years. Right? Like, it's not going to be easy. Because, I'm not going to lead that revolution. I'm 55 years old. I'm past the age of bearing children. Well, not really, but I am. For all intents and purposes. My wife is 53, right? So she ain't having any more kids. We've made the conscious decision to say, yeah, no more. And we said that a while ago. Even though we did want more children. But didn't work out.
This confusion with the genders. Mm-hmm. You think that when it gets really bad, people decide that this is not what they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I think is going to happen. I really do, Rachel. I really think that's where we're headed, because it's always been. That's what. Because look, every extreme is met with, in many ways, I'm not a big, I remember, as a scientist, as a guy, I believe in a quantum universe, but I also believe in Newton. And, we're Newtonian beings. Like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Mm.
Right. So, the question now is, and this is, I keep warning people about this. I think it's why I find it really fascinating that I keep going back to stories. Why did Warner Brothers finally greenlight a proper adaptation of the book Dune? Why is one of the few truly decent guys in Hollywood, Denis Villeneuve, in charge of this project? How did that happen in maximally corrupt, woke Hollywood? And gets the green light to not only tell the first book, which is the fairy tale of the young adult story of Paul Atreides becoming a hero and a man and a father, but also to tell the next two books where we see the jihad that he unleashes on the galaxy afterwards. How does that happen if Klaus Schwab and all these evil mustache twirling commies are like got their thumb on the scale, destroying everything? How does that happen? Well, and more appropriately, look at what happened with that film when the first one came out. It was a massive hit, not just because it was a good movie, because it was, but because it was the right time for it. As opposed to 1984, when David Lynch made his version, campy though it may be, the story of Dune that Herbert wrote in the early 60s and published in 65, and then the two sequels over the next decade. That whole cycle of story is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly important. Was incredibly prescient. It was way ahead of its time because it was telling us where this cycle of history ends. Because what are the Fremen? They are repressed masculinity that turns unbelievably toxic. And for those of you who haven't, spoiler alert, for those of you who haven't read the books, that jihad that Paul's worried about and that you see him flash forwarding to in the early, in the first movie, guess what? It comes to pass. He can't stop it. They kill billions of people. They tear down the old system. And he's powerless to stop it. That's the story of Paul Atreides. Why are those movies going to be made? He'll make 3 movies. He'll finish the first book and then he'll tie the second 2 books up in one film, which is the right way of doing it. If I was a screenwriter as well. But why is this happening now? Why is this? Why are we responding to it now this way? Because it's a warning. We have a masculinity crisis, and the equal and opposite reaction to them trying to push men away from being men and being gender fluid, and push women away from being women and being gender fluid. What do you think is going to come out of that? Hypermasculinity and hyperfemininity. That's what's going to come out of them. And if you don't see that in Chani, Paul, Jessica, like they're all right there. Like it's all right there in front of you. Herbert was absolutely spot on with his depiction of this, and we're now responding to it. What if the second part, Dune Part 2, makes more money than the first one? What does that say? Right? Like this is why, even though I mostly do geopolitics and finance, right? Why I still monitor the culture. Like, because it's like a great line from The Tick. Like, come on, Arthur, let us sit down and monitor the culture. And he takes the television remote and he turns on the TV, right? It's a brilliant line. But it's why I do this, because in order to understand where you are, in order to understand what's happening today, you have to understand what's happening in the bigger sweep of history. And then, time slice it out, and then dial in or dial out your focus, depending on where you think you're, what argument you're trying to make about what's happening. Right. So, and it's a lesson you learn from proper stock trading analysis, which is that all time is fractal and all information is fractal. And so when you care about what's happening today, you look at short-term charts, and when you want to understand whether or not an asset is in a long-term market, bull market or bear market, you look at a longer-term chart and you aggregate, and it's the same kind of thing. And you change your focus constantly depending on what kind of argument you're trying to make. Well, the culture works the exact same way, because what's stock? What are stocks? What are the price? What is stock trading? It's just a whole big human emotion generator. And we just see, it's a proxy for what people think of what's going on in the world. So
we understand that the woke culture, that something is wrong.
mm-hmm.
People are sensing this. And what do you think helps certain individuals, men or women, fight against this?
Becoming aware of your own behavior. You got to look inward to figure out what's going to happen out there. You got to start here. Jordan Peterson's right about this. Clean your room. Everybody. Don't be afraid.
Your bed.
Yeah, no, I mean, seriously. And I say that, outside of the purview of this camera, you should see the wreck that is this office, right? I don't sit here and speak from any like, oh, I've got all my shit together. Are you out of your mind? Like my life is as much a mess as anybody else's, if not more so, right? But like everything else, you do your very best, clean up the chaos around you, create an environment, and start emotionally. And if you need to, start externally. Pick up that stuff around your house. Clean not just your physical space, which will create a little bit of order for yourself, but also it'll then start creating emotional stability as well, and excise from your life the things that make you crazy. Like it's not hard. And I've had to do this over the years. There are many times when I've looked at it, I'm like, I'm in a bad relationship with this person. I've known them for 30 years, but we're really not particularly good friends. Or this relationship has outlived its usefulness. Or I've become something that they don't like, and they become something that I don't like. And, no blame, no shame. We move on with our lives. Right. But at the same time, leaving open empathy for whatever somebody else is going through is also really important, because that's how you're going to rebuild that relationship, for example. So look inward, clean yourself up, because if you clean yourself up, then you become a node of stability and an example for somebody else to set, for somebody else to have the courage to stand up and go, well, he did it, so I can do it. And you can say with, humbly, yeah, it was a lot of work. It was really hard. A lot of years of therapy, or a lot of years of this, or a lot of years of that. But, it might not be as hard for you. But, I'm here to help you on the journey, whatever you need. And we move forward. And that's how we're going to rebuild things. So I tell people all the time that, cultivate your relationships in meat space. But the cyberspace, relationships are fine, and they're great, and they serve a certain purpose and a certain need. But your relationships in meat space matter the most. And because that's how your local community is going to survive. That's how people are going to know, hey, you're a resource for this, and you find out they're a resource for that. And guess what? I have a friend who I know that if I need work done around my house, or I need something, if I need something out of my normal purview, all I got to do is call this guy. And guess what? He probably knows a guy.
Yes.
Because he always has. And if he doesn't, he'll find somebody for me, because if he doesn't know a guy he knows will know a guy. Yes. And then you make another connection. And all of a sudden, the local community is strengthened, because now you all have a relationship with each other. And then you find out, hey, y'all like each other. And then you give each other breaks, and you give each other, advice or whatever. And, you do business with each other, and all of a sudden, hey man, you're cool. We're having a barbecue on Saturday. You want to come over? Cool. Great. And then a business relationship turns into a personal relationship. This is how life works. They want to destroy all that. They want to stick us in 15-minute cities and and make each other hate each other. Like, no, the hell with you. That's what you want. I'm not going to do that. So, and the essence of regaining your healthy masculinity is being ungovernable, is just saying, you know what? No, I'm not doing it. I'm doing what I want to do. And I'll figure out a way to get around that. And I'm going to lead by example to everybody around me and to my wife or my girlfriend or whoever. You know, how do you make sense of all this? I do it this way. Yeah. And you know, if you're in a toxic relationship, again, toxic relationships, work, family, home, friends, whatever. Right? Why do you think I do this for a living? It's not because I'm good at it. It's because every other time I've tried to like fit into be a cog in a machine, you know, and even a well-intentioned, potentially well-functioning machine, it's not worked out. Ultimately, I couldn't trust anybody except myself. And now that's the only business I can run. You know, it's the only way I can make a living. And it turned out it was good for me, but it's not going to be for everybody, you know, but, you know, go out there and build a business and build a thing, whatever it happens to be. You're good at something.
You mentioned it being ungovernable, and Jordan Peterson talks about the dangerous man, that this is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we need to fight back.
Yes. Yeah, no, it is. It's that classic that, yeah, will never forget the first time I listened to him, one of his early lectures before he became famous, really, or just as he was becoming famous. And he was talking about in his biblical lecture series, talking about the classic definition of the word meek. The word, and it's, you know, the meek shall inherit the earth. Well, meek does not mean, oh, yes, please, sir, may I have some more? No, meek means a man who has weapons but knows when to keep them sheathed. That's a fundamentally different thing. By the way, communists are really good at redefining words to their advantage. So whenever you're watching a word be twisted into a new definition, you're dealing with a communist. They're doing it on purpose. And because communist is my catch-all for tyrannical asshole, frankly. And because it all leads to the same place. Control over the means of production, control over behavior, because it all winds up in the same place. In order to control the means of production, you have to have total control over all pillars of society. And we have to divorce people from their past, and we have to create the new Soviet man, and blah, blah. It all winds up in the same place. It always has, it always will, because that's what this type of thinking leads to. The meek man looks up and says, you know what? I don't really. It's like the classic movie The Quiet Man with, I think, Gary Cooper. Same thing. It's that archetype of, you know, the man slow to anger, but once you step over the line, you're done. Right. And you know, you keep lines of communication open. You try and find nonviolent solutions to things. But if all you're going to do is continue to press me until the point where, and poke me in the chest until you say, you know, this is what we're doing, well, then I live by another rule. Never start a fight, but always finish them. Yeah. So this is where we are. And that's the dangerous man. That's the guy they're absolutely want to get rid of. And you get rid of that man systematically by undermining his position in his own relationship with the opposite sex. You undermine his relationship with himself. You give him distractions, and you grind him down by creating a regulatory environment where, you know, he has to fight really, really hard for not a lot of reward. Eventually, you know, a great swath of men just give up. And then the women get, you know, equally crazy because the men have given up. And it's a back and forth, you know, each iteration of this. And like, you know, there are small cycles within the bigger cycle that, the women are dominant for a little while, then the men are dominant for a while, and they go back and forth. And, and it just keeps getting worse until they're so far apart from each other, they don't even know how to speak to each other anymore. And that's where we kind of are today. So yeah, they're worried about the dangerous man, because the dangerous man sees them for what they are, goes, I can see you. And you know what? No. No. And that guy, they'll just kill him.
You mentioned, that men, perhaps they are being sedated, and men who give up, this is what they want. And Jordan Peterson talks about pornography and psychopathy. And do you think that that is part of the sedation?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I've been, I can look at my own behavior over the years and go, yeah, you're either medicating or you're tuning out. Right. And, but I think, I'd also, would hesitate to, what's the way I want to put this? I would hesitate to be too hard on yourself.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like, there comes a point where you kind of have to look at it and go, yep. Yeah, I did that. Okay. Integrate it, deal with it, acknowledge it, try and improve it. How do you do that? Well, you improve again, baby steps, clean your room, do this, do that, do all these little things. And again, be an example for other people. By doing that, you're an example for other people. And then we all kind of begin to lift ourselves out of the funk. But, start with one of them, spend, like, again, like take half an hour, go take a walk in nature every day for half an hour, reconnect with some real part of yourself. It could be simple. It could be a simple thing. Like, I resolve to make sure that the kitchen is always clean. That I'm not going to let the dishes stack up until the point where it's, whatever. We're just on the verge of, breeding flies, right? Whatever. I mean, pick some little thing and fix it. And then go, yeah, I fixed that. And then take pride in the fact that you fixed it. It's important. Yeah, it's a simple little thing. Yeah, your dad moved mountains, and all you can barely do is, get yourself up off the couch. But you got yourself up off the couch. Forgive yourself your past mistakes as best you can. Oh my God, I grew up, Catholic. You know how hard it is to forgive yourself over anything. Like you live your entire life doing self-flagellation, like. But at the same time, you got to do it. And, put yourself in a position where you have relationships around you that support that process. And if you have people telling you not to, or indulging your sitting on the couch, maybe you need to exile some of those people. Maybe that's the first step to cleaning your room. I don't know. Everybody's going to be different. Right. So, for my wife and I, it's a matter of intellectual discourse or intellectual pursuit about looking for the thing, and that's the way we do it, right? We do it through discourse and bouncing ideas off of each other. This is why we're still married, even when we probably should have gotten broken up years ago. But because we find each other endlessly fascinating to talk to as friends, we made it work. And now we look at it today and go, it's not bad. It's probably as good as it's ever been. And that's a good thing. But it was a lot of work to get there. And it was a lot, I'll be honest with you, it was a lot of work, more work on her part than it was mine. So, look, no one is, everyone is fallible, right? Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone is on a path. You're not going to be 100% on the path all the time. You got to I'm not, I know what the best, I know what diet I, for example, I know what diet I work best under, right? I work best when I operate best. My body, my mind, all of it works best when I mostly eat carnivore with the occasional, foray into French fries. Right? Do I live up to that standard all the time? No. Have I put on some weight in the last year and a half? Yes. Is there a reason for that? Yes. Have you examined why that is? Yes. Am I going to share that today? No. That's for me. But at least be aware of your behavior. And then ask yourself, why am I doing this? And if you can start to identify your coping mechanisms, you can start, because remember, your coping mechanisms are not things to be ashamed of. They were important to get you through a previous trauma, whatever that trauma was. And we're all trauma victims. So, have a little empathy for your former self that was traumatized by something, as opposed to, berating yourself for not living up to some ideal, some platonic ideal that you have in your head, which doesn't exist anyway, because that version of you doesn't exist. It never has. It's something to strive for, but you're not going to reach it. You're not, but you're going to get close to it if you're honest with yourself. And then you're going to find out just how powerful you actually are. And that may actually scare a lot of people.
Men can fight back in the masculinity crisis by getting themselves some wins.
Yep. Yeah, by getting some wins. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I pick a win. Again, keep a girlfriend for more than 6 months. I don't know. Remember Mother's Day. If it's your wife, I'll be honest with you. I've gone through this, where I'm like, oh my God, it's Mother's Day. And I'm like, feeling like, holy Christ, how did I not, how did I get so caught up in my own life, in my own head, that I forgot about the basics? And we all do it. I joke that I'm lucky. I have anniversary week and not anniversary day, because my wife and I eloped effectively. And, we went and we signed the marriage license on February 7th, but we didn't actually say the vows in front of a notary until the 14th. So from the 14th to the 20th, it was 14th to the 21st. So I have from the 14th to the 21st to make sure that I got my wife flowers for the anniversary. I'm lucky. I don't have to hit the 14th. I can keep her guessing for 4 or 5 days as to whether or not I'm going to remember. Which is the game I play now. But for years, it was like, oh my God, I forgot. Right? And it's not because she's going to hate me for it. It's because I'm not taking care of, I'm not providing that emotional safety to say, yes, dear, your needs are important to me, even though personally, certainly at the time, I thought doing things like buying her flowers is just a waste of money and stupid, but it isn't to her. So now the question is, who are you serving here? Yourself or the person that you say you care so much about? Oh, now you ask, now is that an obligation? No, I don't even think twice about it. No, it's not an obligation. Now, having reframed it and gone, oh yeah, you were the asshole. Now go out and do the right thing. And so now I have a game I can play with, and that's a win for men.
Yes.
That's a win. Okay? That's a win.
Beautiful. I love it. Ask questions, reframe. You'll feel better. You'll get a win.
Get a win, build on the win. You'll be amazed at the level of response you'll get. And if you don't, if you find out at that point that you're dealing with a hopeless narcissist who, just wants to keep you down, well, then you know what to do as well.
Yes. Yes. And what would your last piece of advice be for the men in this masculinity crisis?
Do things that express your testosterone, because that's the thing that chemically will get you where you need to go. Yes. So yeah, I hate to tell you guys, but do some push-ups. Put down, no, seriously, put down the diet soda, clean up your liver, clean up your, put down the alcohol, clean up your liver, get the in basic terms, get the insulin Because here's a really simple thing. You want to really, in order to start being better, you have to start feeling better. And here's a simple one. Ready? Insulin takes up the same receptor spots on your muscles that testosterone does. Okay. This is the barrier. This is what insulin resistance is. You're already suffused to the gills with insulin. So how do you get rid of that? You burn the insulin off. How do you burn the insulin off? You do weight training. You don't have to like be religious about this. You don't have to go to the gym 6 times a week. Do some push-ups for Christ's sake. Like, you know what I mean? Do some squats and some push-ups. Go for a walk in, where I live. I go for a walk in sugar sand. Like, build your legs up. Go take a martial arts class or something. Just something. A couple of days a week where you go and interact with men in a physical way, or yourself and your body in a physical way. You only have to do a little bit, a couple times a week. And clean up your diet. Because once that's cleaned up, you're going to feel better. You're going to repair a lot of the damage. And then that's the path to cleaning up a lot of the emotional damage. And then you can move forward. And you might, and women might actually find you attractive. Doesn't happen to me all that often, but I'm telling you, like, it's good enough. I'm married 31 years. I don't have to worry about it. But I'm serious. Like, this is important. Guy to guy, it's what they're looking for. It's what women are looking for. And I think I see a lot of that in the younger men. They don't know. They know. That's part of what's going on, and it's interesting. It's a different thing than my generation. My generation weren't. We looked at muscle bound. We looked at Rambo types, and because we were all snide and sarcastic and latchkey kids and angry at the world. And so we did a lot of coping mechanisms. Right. But, we'll see. The turn's going to come. The dangerous men are going to return. But decide what type of dangerous man you want to be and be constructive in your danger. Because otherwise, that path leads to the Fremen or the French Revolution. And while I joke all the time, half joke, I say, I'm along guillotines and rope makers just because these people won't stop trying to rule the world, because I can see where it leads. I don't want to win. I don't want that investment to pay off. You know what I mean? That's the last thing I want. I want to be wrong about. That's the one I want to be wrong about. I want to be short guillotines and rope makers, but guess what? I'm going to continue to be long until I see something fundamentally change. So that's what I have for you, Rachel.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much, Tom Luongo.
Thank you. Have a good day now.